Are the $2,000 still enough, sweetheart? Her voice was gentle, warm, even affectionate. But in the hush that followed, it rang out like a gavel. It cracked the room in half. Forks paused mid-air. Caroline stopped chewing. Sarah's wine glass froze just before her lips. The long, polished oak table, gleaming with crystal and candlelight, suddenly felt like a courtroom. And I was the accused. I could feel it in their stares. Not pity, not curiosity, disgust, thinly veiled beneath false smiles and forced chuckles. My grandmother, bless her heart, meant no harm. Her words came from love. She always meant, well, but what she didn't know was that sentence. That one sentence. It shattered the facade I had spent years building. And what followed changed everything. I'm Lillian, but no one in my family calls me that. They call me Lil. Or worse, they just look at me and smile with that awkward pause, like they're trying to remember who I used to be before I became the person they whisper about in side conversations. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. The mistake? The one who never quite got it right. The one who dropped out of college, moved into a studio apartment the size of a bathroom, and worked jobs they considered beneath them. Barista, admin assistant, dog walker. They call me a free spirit, but that's just polite code for disappointment. Meanwhile, Sarah became a lawyer before 30. Tall, sharp, and unapologetic in her designer suits. If ambition had a face, it'd look like her. Caroline, the perfect wife. 2 kids, a lifestyle blog, a marriage that looked like a Pinterest board, and me. I was the one who didn't fit, didn't follow, didn't perform, didn't become. At least, not in the way they expected. But what they never knew, what they still don't fully understand, is that while they were building resumes and family trees, I was building resilience. In silence. And that silence would one day be louder than all their applause combined. Flashback, I still remember the day I dropped out of college. It was fall. Leaves turning gold. Wind sharp against my skin. I stood in front of the registrar's office, paper in hand, hands shaking. Not out of fear, but relief. Law school wasn't killing me, but it was suffocating every part of me that felt alive. I couldn't do it anymore, so I stopped. I walked away from the track they built for me and walked straight into the wilderness. I remember coming home to tell my parents. The silence after I said the words, "I'm not going back." My mother looked like I had announced I was becoming a criminal. My father just sighed, long, heavy, like my decision had confirmed everything he feared about me. That night, I cried on the bathroom floor of my apartment, the kind of crying that doesn't make noise, the kind where your body folds in on itself like a broken thing. And then the next morning, a knock. It was a courier, an envelope inside, a handwritten note. Every woman needs her own power. Take it while you build yours. Grandma? Attached was a check for $2,000. That was the first time, and for the next 3 years, she sent one every single month. Back at the table, present day, I blinked. The words still hanging in the air like a chandelier that had snapped from the ceiling, falling in slow motion. Are the $2,000 still enough, sweetheart? I wanted to scream. Not at her, but at them. Because I could already feel the looks. Caroline's smug smirk. Sarah's condescending chuckle as she sipped her overpriced wine. My mother's cold glance, barely hiding her embarrassment. And my father's stone silent, jaw tight. What they didn't know was this. That very month, I had just crossed $1.2 million in revenue at my boutique digital agency. I had 6 high-profile clients, a team of 4, and contracts booked 6 months out, all built by hand. No investors, no family name, no applause. Just hustle, skill, grit, and yes, a grandmother who refused to let me drown. But none of them knew that, because I never told them. Not out of shame, but because they never asked. So I smiled, softly, looked Grandma in the eye, and said, "Thank you." It meant everything while I was building. And that's all I said. But in my mind, a fire had started. Not of anger, but of clarity. If you've ever been made to feel small, like your survival was something to be ashamed of, if your healing, your growth, your process was seen as failure instead of the miracle it actually is, then you know what I felt at that table. They didn't see me as strong. They saw me as dependent. But they were looking through the wrong lens, because I wasn't being carried. I was becoming, and they were about to find out exactly who I had become. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, spinning shadows across the walls, replaying every look, every breath, every second of that sentence. Are the $2,000 still enough, sweetheart? It wasn't the question itself, it was what came after it. The silence. The judgment masquerading as curiosity. The way they looked at me as if I had just confirmed the role they had cast me in all along. The dependent. The delicate one. The girl who couldn't stand on her own 2 feet, but they didn't know. They had no idea what I had done with those $2,000. How I had taken each cent and turned it into survival, and then turned survival into strategy. Flashback. Year 1, the money barely covered rent. I lived in a shoebox apartment above a noisy laundromat. The walls were thin, the plumbing hissed like it held secrets, and every morning the smell of detergent mixed with exhaust fumes crept under my door. I didn't go out, I didn't party. I couldn't afford to waste energy on anything. But growth? While Caroline posted curated photos of her morning lattes and Sarah took business class trips to New York, I sat cross-legged on a thrifted mattress, watching YouTube tutorials on branding, design, SEO. I taught myself how to build websites, how to write copy that sells, how to pitch, how to close, how to make them look. I built a portfolio under a pseudonym because I was scared my name would make them laugh. Not clients, my family. I worked from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. for months. No vacations, no backup plan. Just me, a secondhand laptop, and a vision I couldn't let die. Back to present day, the Monday after the dinner, I walked into my office, small but real. Sunlight spilled in through big windows I had paid for. A real desk, a whiteboard covered in timelines and branding notes. My team greeted me with smiles, ready to dive in. I wasn't that girl on the bathroom floor anymore. I was someone else now. Someone they would never recognize because they never stayed long enough to see me evolve. Sometimes we carry the shame of being underestimated like a tattoo on our soul. We try to outgrow it. But the truth is, it's not our shame to carry, it's theirs. Their lack of vision. Their lack of faith. Later that week, my grandmother called. Sweetheart. She said gently, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I was just proud. I paused. Not because I didn't believe her, but because the truth hurt more than the insult ever could. I know, Grandma, but they think the money kept me alive. They don't know it made me unstoppable. She laughed. That soft, raspy laugh like a secret only the two of us shared. Let them think what they want. That's the beauty of quiet power. By the time they notice, it's already too late. Flashback, year 2, that's when the breakthrough happened. I had just finished a brand campaign for a wellness coach. She cried on Zoom when she saw the final product. Said it made her feel seen for the first time in her life. She referred to more clients than 8. I was still invisible to my family, but I was finally being seen by people who mattered. And still, I told no one. Not because I was afraid, but because I was busy becoming. Ben came the birthday party. Not mine. Caroline's, she was turning 33. A garden party, of course. Chandeliers hanging from tree branches, violin music in the background, imported AAWs I couldn't pronounce. I almost didn't go, but Grandma insisted. You belong wherever you want to stand, she said. So I went. Wore black again, not to mourn, but to sharpen myself. To be armor in a place where they only wore silk. The minute I stepped into the garden, Sarah spotted me. Her smile was a performance. Sharp, sweet, so rehearsed. It made my skin crawl. Lil, you made it. We were just talking about the economy, she said with a knowing smirk. Must be tough for freelancers these days. She said freelancers. The way people say parasites. I smiled. Oh, it's actually been our strongest quarter yet. Her face froze. I nodded. My agency. We just signed 2 international brands. Hiring 3 new designers next month. The silence was delicious. And for the first time, she looked uncertain. Caroline came next. Must be nice, not having real responsibility yet, she said, balancing her baby on her hip like a trophy. I just looked at her, and then I said something I hadn't planned. Responsibility isn't just diapers and dinner plans. Carolyn, some of us are building legacies. It slipped out, but it landed. Like thunder. Even Grandma looked up. That night, as I walked back to my car under the fairy lights, I felt something I hadn't in years. Pride. Not because I had one, but because I hadn't needed to win. I had simply shown up. And sometimes, that's the loudest power of all. They want you small, predictable, palatable. But when you step out of their expectations, when you grow in the dark, quietly, stubbornly, it terrifies them. Not because you failed, but because you didn't need them to rise. Some shifts are loud, a slam of a door, a raised voice, a resignation letter dropped onto a polished desk. Mine wasn't. Mine was silent, a tectonic shift beneath their feet. And by the time they noticed, they were already standing on unfamiliar ground. A month after Caroline's garden party, I was invited to speak at a small women's entrepreneur conference in the city. Nothing glamorous, just a community center, folding chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups. But the room was full of women with eyes like mine, tired, sharp, hungry. I stood on a low platform with no microphone, just my voice and my story. I told them the truth, how I failed, how I started, how I stayed silent while the people who should have cheered for me laughed instead, how I took those $2,000 and turned them into a foundation. Not just financial, emotional, something stirred in the room. One woman cried, another took furious notes. A teenager came up after and hugged me without saying a word. I didn't post about it, didn't brag, but somehow that speech got passed around. A local journalist reached out, then a podcast host, then a TEDx organizer. Within 6 months, I had spoken in 4 cities, told my story over 1 million times through microphones, recordings, and conference stages. Each time, I started the same way. Are the $2,000 still enough, sweetheart? It was my weapon now. The sentence they tried to use to shame me had become my opening line. This story no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. Flashback. A birthday that wasn't mine, I got a call from my father one evening. He never called. My stomach dropped when I saw his name. He didn't waste time. We're throwing a party for your mother's 60th. It's important. Your sisters are helping. That was all he said. No, how are you? No, we'd love to see you. Just obligation. I said I'd think about it, and then he added, your grandmother's not doing well. She'd want you there. That changed everything. I didn't go for them. I went for her. I arrived late, not out of spite. I had a client call run long, a negotiation with the French fashion startup we were onboarding. When I walked into the venue, some luxury event space downtown, I saw them all. Sarah in a red dress, too tight to be casual. Carolyn instructing a photographer on her best angles. My mother, radiant but distracted. My father, scanning the room like he owned it. And Grandma, in a corner, seated, a glass of ginger ale in hand, looking at me like I was the only real thing in the room. I walked straight to her, bent down, kissed her cheek. She whispered, I'm so proud, sweetheart. I whispered back, you always were. Later that night, there was a toast. Sarah spoke first, something about legacy and family and success. Words that tasted like cold champagne, elegant but empty. Caroline followed. A rehearsed story about motherhood and resilience. Then my mother, she thanked everyone. She was gracious. But then she said this, and thank you to my daughters for making me proud in such different ways. Sarah, for her brilliance. Carolyn, for her devotion. And Lillian, for always reminding me that love is unconditional. It was a sweet line, a safe one. But I heard what she didn't say. And so did Grandma. After the toast, as everyone filtered into dancing and dessert, I stayed by the bar. My father approached. He looked older, tired, more human than I remembered. I saw that interview you did, he said. I sipped my wine. Oh, you speak well? Never knew you had that in you. I didn't smile, because it wasn't a compliment. It was a confession. They had never looked long enough to know who I was becoming. I've always had it in me. I said, you just didn't notice. He nodded, but said nothing more. Because what could he say? That week, I made a decision. No more silence. Not for revenge, but for the ones still trapped. Women like me, underestimated, overlooked, underfunded. I founded the Quiet Fund, a microgrant organization for women starting over. No application fees, no long essays, just stories I read every one. And in each I saw fragments of myself. The single mother trying to open a bakery. The immigrant student working night shifts while coding during the day. The woman escaping a marriage where she was told she'd never survive alone. I funded them, not all of them, but enough to start a fire. And I made them a promise. You are not small. You are just beginning. And I believe in beginnings. The first month, we gave out 12 grants. By month 3, we had a waiting list. Of 700, I was still running my agency, still speaking, still building in silence. But now, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about planting seeds. Seeds they would never see, but roots that would outlive them all. One night, I got a message from Sarah. No subject line, no greeting. Just, Do you think your quiet fund could help a friend of mine? She's going through something. I stared at it for a long time, not with bitterness, not with pride, but with curiosity. Because even the proudest sometimes come back humbled. I replied, send her my way, no promises, but I'll listen. That was all. Because I wasn't her sister anymore. Not the one she used to compete with. I was someone else. Now, someone she had no framework for. They tried to define you by your lowest moment. But what they didn't realize is you were never a failure. You were just unfolding. Success doesn't feel like fireworks. Not when you've earned it alone. It feels like quiet mornings with black coffee in a place you paid for. It feels like invoices paid on time. Clients referring clients. Your name being spoken in rooms you've never entered. It feels like peace, and peace was a new thing for me. But I wasn't naive. I knew peace would cost something, and soon it did. Grandma's health declined fast. Faster than any of us expected. One week, she was sending me a photo of her garden blooming with violets. The next, she was in a hospital bed with wires taped to her skin and her hands too weak. To hold a cup, I flew to her bedside alone. Neither Sarah nor Caroline were there. My father came once, stayed for 10 minutes, and left without a word. My mother sent flowers, but I sat with her for 4 days straight. Read to her, brushed her hair, played her favorite jazz records low in the background while machines beeped rhythmically beside her. On the second night, she opened her eyes and whispered, "You were always the strong one, Lil." I laughed softly, brushing a tear off her cheek. "No one else thinks so," she smiled. "Because strength isn't loud. It's persistent." Her breathing was shallow, but her gaze was clear. Do they know yet? Know what? That they bet against the wrong one. I smiled again, but my throat tightened. No, not yet. She closed her eyes for a moment. Good. Let it stay. That way a little longer. Power is more delicious when it's revealed, not declared. That was Grandma, even dying, she thought in poetry. She passed 2 days later, peacefully, softly, no drama, no goodbyes. Just silence. The funeral was beautiful, understated. Exactly how she would have wanted. Everyone wore black. Everyone cried. Even Sarah. Caroline showed up in white, of course. Said it was a spiritual choice. Typical. I gave the eulogy. I hadn't planned to. But the priest asked if anyone wanted to speak. And I stood, hands trembling, voice low. I am who I am because one woman believed I could be more than what the world told me I was. I didn't cry. I spoke every word like a vow. She didn't rescue me. She reminded me that rescue was mine to choose. That power isn't inherited. It's grown quietly beneath the surface. And then I ended with the line that started it all. And yes, the $2,000 were more than enough. After the funeral, I walked alone through the garden outside the chapel. I felt hollow, like my center had been scooped out. She had been my only safe place in the entire bloodline. The only one who saw me without needing a label. And now she was gone. That night, I lit a candle at home, put on her favorite song, and opened the last letter she ever wrote me. It had arrived the week before she passed. Short, deliberate, written in a trembling hand, to the one who kept going, to the one who knew she was fire. Even when they saw smoke. You were never a disappointment. You are the revolution. Spend the rest of your life making them doubt every judgment they ever made about you, and never, ever shrink again. I didn't. 2 months later, I was featured in Forbes. It wasn't something I chased. They reached out. The article was titled, "Quiet Power: How One Woman Turned Family Rejection into a Global Movement." It went viral. Sarah didn't say a word. Carolyn posted something vague about celebrating women in business and tagged me without comment. My parents sent a fruit basket, and I kept going because I wasn't building for them. I was building for girls like me. The Quiet Fund now had 3,000 women funded in 27 countries. We didn't just give money. We gave mentorship, strategy, community. We gave language to those who'd been silenced. And I traveled often to schools, shelters, small-town business expos, wherever a girl sat quietly in the back of a room, feeling like she didn't belong. I showed up, and every time I opened my speech with the same story. Are the $2,000 still enough, sweetheart? Let me tell you what that sentence did to me. And what I did with it, flashback. The last family dinner, the next time we all sat together again, Sarah, Caroline, my parents, me, it was Christmas. Grandma's chair was empty, but her presence was loud. Her absence was the elephant. No one dared acknowledge. Dinner was quiet, polite, uncomfortable, until Caroline broke the silence. So, I read the article. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, she sipped her wine. I didn't realize it was that serious. What you were doing. I smiled. Most people don't realize how serious things are until it's too late. Sarah snorted. But it wasn't contempt this time. It was surrender. My father cleared his throat. I suppose we owe you an apology, he said. I put down my fork. For what? He hesitated. For not seeing you. I didn't say anything. Because silence, sometimes, is the only answer you need. That night, I walked out of the house for the last time. No drama, no fight, just closure. Because finally, I understood they didn't have to see me for me to be real. I had already become, with or without their gaze. Some of us were never meant to blend in. Some of us were born to disrupt the lineage, to crack the mold, to be the first one who says, this cycle ends with me. And yes, they'll laugh at you, whisper about you, minimize your efforts. But remember this, every great story starts with someone being misunderstood. 2 years after my grandmother passed, I visited her house again. It had been sitting empty. Overgrown ivy climbing the porch columns, dust inside so thick you could write your name in it. No one in the family claimed it. It was too far, too old, too quiet. But to me, it was a cathedral. This house raised me, not in body, but in belief. I walked through the kitchen where she taught me how to cook soup when I was 12. The window where we used to press our faces. During summer storms, the hallway where she hung the family portraits, and always left a space blank. When I asked her why once, she smiled and said, that's for the one who becomes too big for the frame. I never forgot that. I bought the house, cash, renovated. It slowly, carefully left the bones, changed the walls, modernized the kitchen, but kept her teacup collection above the sink. Then, one spring morning, I opened the doors to the quiet house, a retreat space for women on the edge. Not broken, just tired, stuck, grieving, burning out. We didn't offer solutions, we offered stillness. Books, silence, warm food. Fireplaces and notebooks and rooms named after wildflowers. We held circles. Not where we talked about our trauma, but where we reclaimed our names. I watched them arrive silent and leave sovereign. Sometimes I still dream about that first dinner. The moment everything turned the way their eyes felt on my skin, but now I see it like an old movie. Grainy, far away. I'm not that girl anymore, and I don't hate her either. She was strong, stronger than I ever gave her credit for, because she didn't yell, she didn't fight, she watched. And then she built one day. A woman arrived at the quiet house, late 40s. No suitcase, just a small backpack and a tired smile. We welcomed her in. She didn't speak much the first 2 days. On the third, during tea, she looked up and said, I read your article, the one about your family. I nodded. She sipped her drink. I never got the $2,000, but I got the silence. The side eyes, the shame. I just never turned it into anything. I reached across the table and took her hand. It's never too late to build something from what they broke, she cried. Then laughed, then cried again. I don't know if Carolyn ever truly respected me, or if Sarah ever forgave herself for dismissing me. I don't know if my parents ever sat alone and realized what they lost when they underestimated their daughter. And I don't need to, because I no longer live in their eyes. I live in my own legacy. I tell this story not to glorify success, but to honor the women who are still in there before, still unseen, still whispered about, still underestimated. I tell it for the ones reading this from tiny apartments with ramen on the stove and doubt in their chest. The ones who feel like maybe, just maybe, they are the mistake in the family. You're not. You're just becoming. And one day, they'll ask, how did you do it? And you'll smile. And you'll say, you thought those $2,000 kept me alive? No. They lit the match. Because some fires don't roar, they simmer, until they ignite an empire. And by the time they notice, it's already too late.